Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video. As you might have seen, I was in Brazil for 3 months this year. I actually hosted a Carnival and Portuguese learning group trip to Rio for 10 days with my travel agency Lingo Travels. If you want to join us on the next trip for Carnival, February 2024, definitely make sure to check out the link in my bio. Registrations are open now, but will end very soon, so definitely check that out. Alright, I wanted to come on here and tell you guys a couple of cultural things you need to know before going to Brazil, because Brazil is such a huge country and culture. And I found out that a lot of people actually don't know much about or have even misconceptions about Brazil before going. So this video is just to clarify a couple of things that I also learned by traveling multiple times to Brazil, by having a lot of Brazilian friends, by being immersed in the culture. And that's actually also everything my group trips are about full cultural immersion. And that's actually how you learn a language the best possible way. Let's get into it. Number one, contrary to most beliefs, Spanish is not the language spoken in Brazil. Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese, so that's why they speak Portuguese and not Brazilian or Spanish like most people assume. And I've seen it when I was there. Tourists always try to communicate with Brazilians in Spanish, and a lot of Brazilians will actually understand them because Spanish and Portuguese is very similar. However, it's not the language, so of course some might be even offended by it. But for the most part, Brazilians are very nice people and very welcoming, so they don't really show that they actually have a problem with it. Nevertheless, if you go to Brazil, definitely make sure you learn a couple of basic Portuguese sentences if you don't have time to take lessons. In this guide that I created, you have everything you need to know as a first-time traveler to Brazil. The most common situations as a traveler are in this cheat sheet. Everything you need to know. So this is no excuse to go to Brazil without knowing any Portuguese. The cheat sheet is also in the link in my description. Number two, Brazil is a vast country. It is big. It's culturally very diverse. You will definitely not find one type of Brazil. You will find so many different regions. The food differs, the culture differs, the music, the dance, everything. When you go to Rio de Janeiro, it's definitely not the same as going to São Paulo. It's definitely not the same as going to Salvador da Bahia. The places are just so different, and so is the culture. By the way, also the accents vary a lot. So definitely don't expect one unified Brazil, because it is just so big that it can't just be one unified culture. There are so many cultures within Brazil which form the whole Brazilian culture. And number three, if you have a 2-week itinerary with all those places you want to go, 10-15 places you want to check out in Brazil, definitely throw that out, because you won't have time to even do half of it. Brazil is so freaking big that most tourists, myself included, when they go for the first time, they just underestimate the distances of the places. They squeeze in so many places they want to visit in the itinerary, and just to find out that it's just not feasible in the short amount of time that you're traveling there. I was the first time there for 1 month. Say 2 weeks in Rio and 2 weeks in Salvador da Bahia, which was the perfect amount to kind of get to know two cities. Nevertheless, the second time I stayed 3 months and another 3 months another time, and I still haven't even done half of the country. It's just so big. So definitely keep that in mind if you want to go to Brazil, that you kind of need to adapt your itinerary, because you will most probably not have time to do all of what you want to do. Also, another thing you need to know is traveling in Brazil is actually quite expensive. For the distances, you will most probably also need to catch flights, and those are not cheap in Brazil. Traveling within the country is actually very expensive also for Brazilians, so that's why a lot of Brazilians don't even have the chance to travel, because the states are big, just like in the US, and most people can travel just like by bus, but the distances again are big. So keep that also in mind, that traveling is not going to be cheap. I'm used to travel prices in Europe, which nothing compared to prices anywhere else. I've heard in the US it's also kind of expensive to travel. So in Europe, we're just used to those 50 euros, 60 euro tickets, which is like nothing here. Here, traveling is like super affordable. Anyone can really travel, and we just move around very easily from one country to another. But of course, the countries in Europe are also much smaller, so it's just easier to get around here. The transportation means are just so many here, which is not the same in Brazil. Number four, if you go for Carnival, you definitely need to know that there is a big kissing culture in Brazil. They just love to hug and kiss. I even went on dates where after like literally 10 minutes, they were like, okay, I can kiss you now. Or I went out with a Colombian friend to a bar, and not even like 5 minutes, we were there dancing, this guy just randomly comes up to her and asks her if he can kiss her. And we were just like so perplexed, looking at each other like, what? They didn't even engage in conversation, nothing. Like, he just saw her from like, I don't know where he was, and just came up and asked her that. But that's very, very common. And guys, just as much as girls, do that. That's very common in Brazil. And Brazilian friends tell me all the time, I kind of like, they easily like kiss like 30-40 people. Of course, it's not everyone, but it's a lot of them that do that. So kissing is just very in the culture. Brasileiros are very beijoqueiros. That's how you say it in Portuguese. Another thing to note, if you go to the beach, then don't use a beach towel. No Brazilian uses actually a towel. They always use kind of like a big scarf that is much lighter, that you can wrap around. You can use it for so many things. It's so versatile, and it is called canga. That's very Brazilian. So when you go to the beach, you will always see people with cangas, not with an actual towel. And cangas are so versatile. Like I said, you can get them anywhere in Brazil. They're super affordable, and they're just the best thing ever. Ever since I've been to Brazil, I never ever use an actual towel when I go to the beach. I always just use a canga, which is much lighter because you dry anyways when you're at the beach, so you don't really need an actual towel. You just need a canga. Also, what you need to know is a lot of people saying before they go, oh, you need cash in Brazil. But no, actually, card goes a very, very, very long way and far away in Brazil. Like, you can pay anything by card, and you could pay the street vendor by card. I've not seen that in any other country, that you could pay a street vendor with card. In Brazil, that's the most common thing. You pay any street vendor, they will have a card machine. If they don't have one, they will ask another street vendor who has a card machine, and will just give it to them. Most of Brazilians don't even use cash, they just use cards. You can pay by card almost anywhere in Brazil. I've not had one situation where I couldn't pay by card in Brazil, but I was in other countries where, many countries, like even in Germany, where a lot of times you can't pay by card. But in Brazil, you can basically pay anything by card. So what I recommend actually is not getting too much cash out, but it's like, you know, bare minimum if you want, but the rest just pay by card. Because honestly, I never carry like that much cash around me anyways, because anywhere I go, really, I just pay by card, and it's just the easiest thing. And a lot of times you actually get better conversion rates when you don't take cash out, but when you just pay by card, depending on what type of card you have. And also, what you need to know about the juices in Brazil, there are fresh fruit juices anywhere. There are stands at the beach, and they have like little snack bars at any corner where you can get fresh juices. Usually at most places, like in Rio, the juices are sweet by default. I guess like for people in the States, that's kind of good. For most Europeans, it's just too sweet for us, because here if you get a fresh orange juice, it's not sweetened because the orange is already sweet in itself. So why would you even put sugar in it? And there, with any kind of fruit juice, they always just like put sugar by default. So you always have to precisely say sem açúcar, which means without sugar. Speaking about drinks, I'm not even a drinker, but beer in Brazil is served ice cold. They like their beer ice cold. They call it gelada, which means literally like ice cold, frozen. It's not frozen, of course, but it's ice cold, almost frozen. So they like their beer like that, of course, because it is hot for the most part. They even have these containers, they call them baldes. They put ice cubes in it, and they serve the beer in that, so that it stays ice cold. And that's how Brazilians like their beer. That's how you will get your beer in Brazil. Also note that it is super easy to meet Brazilians when you're traveling in Brazil. It's super easy to meet Brazilians anywhere, really, because they are very friendly and open, and they like to embrace you, take you into their culture. So it is very, very easy to just make friends anywhere you go. I've never ever had a hard time. It is actually the easiest way to make friends with Brazilians, because they're always very open, as if they've known you like forever. For the most part, it's always like that. So whereas if you go solo, or if you're going with a group, definitely try to also make friends with Brazilians, because if you make friends, it is always going to be so much more enriching for your trip. Also, like in some other cultures, they say auntie or uncle. In Portuguese also they say it, but if kids say it, it's usually normal. They could say it even to like a good friend of their parents, you know, like tio or tia. But it could also go the other way around, where they just say it just to say like that guy or that girl. They could also be considered rude sometimes. So this is something you'll hear also, tia or tio, when you're in Brazil. Another thing you need to know, which is definitely very important, is that whenever you use the toilet in Brazil, you're actually not supposed to flush flush the toilet paper down because the sewage system is just not that strong for the toilets there. So what they usually have like is a basket bin, a trash bin next to the toilet where people throw their waste in. But personally, I just find it gross. So I just flush it. I shouldn't do that, but yeah, it's not everywhere, but for the most part. And when you're at hotels, they have stronger pipes. So at hotels or in also most modern apartments, it's completely fine. All right, so those were a couple of things you need to know before going to Brazil. Definitely make sure to check out my coming up Carnival trip in February if you want to join us. The link and info is in my description. And see you in my next video. Ciao, ciao.